So hopefully you can all see my screen on my side. It's showing that everything's working. So from your end, just make sure you could see my screen and you can hear me. Let's see. Now we are going to continue with where we left the other day. I believe we did cover quite a bit on the HTML side. So it was a bit complex and kind of scattered lot of knowledge. But we are going to keep that in perspective and we'll just go along with the next topic. That's pretty much like a follow-up of what you've learned before, except that now we are going to use something called a simulator, which is going to pretend as if the indexing process is starting on the search engine side, and the search engine is looking at individual content pages that it is collecting and putting it, and before it gets ready to index it or physically puts it's in its data records, it's going to first uh, start to dissect it, make it more granular for it to segregate and separate and organize the type of content and everything else. So we'll just go through it. Just so you know that this is a simulation, so it's not a guarantee that it's exactly what search engine does, but the best of our knowledge and based on what we learned from the outcome of the search results, we have these few slides we share with you. So when the crawlers or robots or these little spiders, they call it, they go and fetch the page for the search engine to start the process of indexing it. Some of the things that it does is shown here in this slide. This is just one of the many functions or one of the many processes of separating the type of information. The first thing, when the pages, let's suppose that this is the snippet or piece of information which is returned as a search result. So it has the URLs, the title, and the description. Taking this example. This example is a little bit old. Our AIRSassociation.org, this URL has changed, or the domain is now AOFIRS. But it doesn't matter, except that it's slightly older than, and it hasn't, the search engine hasn't changed much after. So the first thing that's going to happen is it's going to look up the page, which is a home page. If you click on this, it's going to take you to a link, which is AIRSassociation.org. In fact, it's taking you to a page that is for certification. So for certification page, if you click on it, you will see that from the user side, we are looking at the end result, which is the user interface. But on the HTML side, or where the search engine has read it, it is going to start to dissect it and start to separate some elements first. First thing that it's going to do is look for title tags, or the title tag which is embedded in the header portion of a page. We have actually learned what the title tag is like. It is just a label that says meta and then is equal to title, and then it has content or text, which is the title information. So that's what it's going to grab first. So title tag, then meta description or the description tag is read, and then meta keywords. Now, what it is showing here is the primary information or the main information the search engine likes to look at first, so that it can distinguish it or separate it from the grand view of what the website is for, or what is the nature of the website, just to get a general idea or grab the vital information as the primary information or the top layer information. And this is what we are viewing, the top layer information. So title tag is grabbed, description is grabbed, so it is informing the search what this site is about. The keywords that's been used are also extracted, even though the user is not looking at it. but from the HTML side, it has read the tag that is got these keywords populated in its tags. Total number of pages the site has, words that have links to the page. You don't have to understand the meaning of all these. This is just to show you or give you an idea of how the indexing process happens. So all these elements, or you could say attributes, which includes things like words that have links on the page, words that have no links on the page, numbers of external links, total distinct words, and the numbers that appear after, which is giving it a kind of indication or telling the index a piece of information which becomes part of the algorithms or part of the computation, which we don't have to worry about right now. But just so that you know that besides just these meta tags embedded information, it is also collecting the overall or getting a sense of what is the volume or the strength of the page, and the algorithms are going to do their job. Right now, let's just assume that these are just numbers against the, yes, we do have these slides and they're in your Dropbox. Brad is asking where this information is. You can actually look up a folder. It's got a name. I believe it's called PowerPoints, right? So that's there. You won't miss it. The next thing the indexing process wants is to extract all the textual or all the text that it can grab from that page. The entire content is there, but it's going to focus on the textual content. So it is going to grab everything that is there in the page that is textual in nature. It is not going to distinguish between the headings or the paragraphs right now, but rather it is going to play with the words. The extraction of the entire text on that page that is within the meta tags is now extracted, and it's been put here the way it is shown in this slide. Now, this is just a small portion of the text. It's giving you an example. Obviously, it's not the entire text, but just so you know that it has a way and it has a nature, or it has a textual semantics or intelligence in terms of how it's going to interpret the language and the words and make sense out of combination of words and a combination of sentences. So that is what we call textual semantics, or an intelligence which has its roots in the sciences of linguistics, basically. So coming back to what we are seeing right now, let's suppose that this is an excerpt, a kind of text that may not appear to the search the way you are looking at it. I have got like few of these words in red fonts. So search is not looking at the red fonts, just so you know. But this is for explaining this slide to you. That's why we have some of the words in red text. Some other words that you see are underlined, okay, while others are just, scattered all over, okay. Now, to understand what the algorithms are going to do or the semantics are going to do, first of all, the words that are in red color, like becoming, of, the word me, the, for, you, and all these that are showing up in red text, these are called stop words. These are the type of words that are used as they are not considered to be nouns, or they're not considered to be valuable words for the search to distinguish them or to separate them as something that would have a meaning on its own. Rather, these are, adverbs, adjectives, and things like, something that puts the sentence to give it a meaning. Yet these are not important enough for the search to consider, in the sense of how you would otherwise use some of the words which are actual nouns or which gives meaning or defines something, uh, as you can now understand from all these that are in red color are different from other words. For example, board members is something that has a meaning for the search, whereas about does not, because it's not a fixed meaning. It is obviously something that is a stop word for it. Become a is a stop word. Find a, for, there is a whole list of these stop words. I mean, generally it's a common sense for us to understand, or to know whether or not these could be considered stop words or not. So there is a huge list of stop words, of course, but that you will find in the book. It's not in the slide. Other words that are not underlined, for example, phrases like in, over, up, etc. Exactly. So these are stop words. Other words that are not underlined, like register, like password, reset, these words are considered to be the kind that alone has a meaning for the search. They don't have to be joined together to give it a special meaning. So register is one word, password is another. These are not underlined. Okay. Again, see right here, account is a one single word that has a meaning. Submit, reminder, please enter. These words have been through the, I guess, the collected wisdom of the search algorithms in the textual sense or in the semantic sense, has become more prominent as something that defines uh, um, uh, or gives a meaning to some event or some situation, or for the user to, without even defining, the search would know what it stands for or what type of information is embedded in it. Account, for example, it knows it is not a bank account. It knows that it is an account on a website. If it is a password and the word like login, it knows what it means. So these are not underlined. But let's look at the other words that are underlined here, like board members, management team, volunteer. These are underlined so that you know that you could actually make or give different meanings, or by adding more than one word, it would appear to have a meaning, not as a single word, but when joined together. Or you could think of how these words can be joined in different ways and still give it a meaning. For example, board members are two words, but it would have a very important meaning for the search. Board management team, without considering the word members, would have a meaning. Team, volunteers would have a meaning. Also, the continuity of these words would give it a different meaning as well, if the search considers them to be sequentially defined or would have a sequence that makes sense. So management team, volunteer would not linguistically, but management team would have a meaning. Volunteer network would have a meaning, and not just the word volunteer alone, but volunteer network would have a meaning together. So there is these combinations and these different variations of how the words would can be set alongside each other or in a certain sequence to give it a meaning, or with two words that can connect together and give it another meaning. So we have placed them or given put them under or underlined them. Now that it is a very deep knowledge of textual intelligence, and we are not dealing with textual intelligence as the algorithms would, which is mechanically programmed. So we're just going to get an idea of what it means and why we have put certain words within under or underlined certain phrases and keywords and not underlined some other ones. And the ones that are in red color are also one of the ways in which the entire text of that HTML page is being organized, okay, for indexing purposes only. Now, what else the search would be doing at the time of indexing? Search is going to just look at the arrow that I'm pointing to, because there's a lot of information and different charts here. So let's just follow this one, for example. One of the things the search is going to do is what we call density analyzation, or it's going to look at certain words which have more influence, or they are used more frequently or with high frequency, or the number of those certain words or search phrases that are on that content page exceeds a certain threshold, so that the algorithms would know the importance or the relevance to the search, or when it's matching your keywords and search terms. So what the word density is going to bring is what we will be looking at. Let's just look at how it's going to, first of all, from what knowledge we have, based on how much of algorithms are inclined to look at the number of words together to get an understanding of word density or the frequency of certain words or search phrases. It's going to entertain 2 or maximum 3 for now, because there is a capacity issue and there is a certain level of logic which cannot exceed a certain number of words. So for now, it's going to look at single word, 2 words, and 3 word combinations. Okay. The word research occurred on that page 35 times. Internet was the second highest number of occurrences, so 22 words. The word certification occurred 13 times, and so the list continues. How many of these words, or to what extent it's going to calculate it, we don't know. Okay. Okay, Christine just came, so I'm going to get her in the class. Now with 2 words, which means that if you're using more than 1 word, you can technically call it a phrase. Yeah. So let's suppose these are the 2 words, internet research. These are more prevalent on that page. The number of words together, or the phrases of internet research, are occurring 10 times on that page, or at least have 10 occurrences, then it has a certain density relative to the number of words on that page. Density is the occurrence. Okay, here is a definition. It says keywords density tells you how often a search term appears in a text in relation to the total number of words it contains. So it is a ratio. If there is 1,000 words, let's say, on a page, and out of 1,000 certain words together as 2 words have a ratio between the number of word versus the search phrases that has occurrences X times, for instance. So it has a relationship, and that relationship is a density. Research specialist occurs 4 times, internet researcher 4 times, and so on. And then there is 3 word counts, like how many of the 3 words. Now, how would the search know, for example, like certain words have more value or anything that it is calculating right now? How is it going to to have benefit, or for the search to have the intelligence to understand whether or not to bring this page up for you, assuming that someone has entered the word internet research specialist as 3 words in the search box. Why would it bring a page that is going to be coming from, let's say, our domain of AOFIRS, AOFIRS Association, particularly the page that we just are analyzing on the certification? So if that is the page that has to occur or appear in the search results, what could be the reason that it is showing AOFIRS only and not any other page? Or let's say there could be another uh, domain that has several pages which also contain the same wordings, internet research specialist. However, that domain is not showing in the first few pages, or maybe it's in the on the 10th page, and therefore it, you know, you never clicked on it, or it just got missed. So I guess the answer to this is that there is a ranking algorithm or something that gives a weightage to whether or not certain pages with the same number of words would occur or appear first, or appear in the first few pages, rather than appear in comparison to the others that are way down on the second, third, or fourth page. It would be competing with those, and would also want you to think of it as if these 3 words have totally missed out the page you're looking for. So that is going to be an issue and a dilemma which we will observe throughout our search, that we will be, it's a hit and miss. Certain pages you won't be able to see, or maybe those pages that has all these 3 words together may not be as relevant information wise, meaning that any other information surrounding those search terms on that page that occurred on a higher ranking and therefore got found may not have as much of a relevance, because all the information that is surrounding these words may not actually serve you the way the other pages, which has a lower ranking and therefore are way down, that you missed out. So that's something that the search engine itself has a control over, and therefore it has the ability to serve those return results the way search engine thinks that it may fit your intent or your context in which you have used those words. So the way we are going to phrase our search query will have a lot of impact. The more context that we give to it, the more of an intent of a user gets revealed to the search engine, because the search engine is mechanically designed to run with certain type of mathematical formulas. It may not be able to translate a human query, anything that you put linguistically in a correct way, but the way the search engine is going to interpret it would have would not get a sense in which you have used those words. That we call intent, and we want to see where our intent will need to be fine-tuned enough that the context will support our intent, and the way we phrase it have to be designed very carefully. So when we go to our next chapters, you would see that we will be discovering 2 types of intent translations. One is expressed, which is what you write in the box. And then there would be another intent translation that we call implied translation. Implied is where the search engine's programming will have an influence in what it's going to return back to you. Even if you have put your intent in the best way possible, still the implicit intent translation by the search engine is something that you'll have to deal with. But the more you have, you understand the implied nature of intent translation, the more you will be able to play that thing correctly, and be able to foresee and correct your phrase or search term with a better understanding, knowing that what could be the influencers on the implied side that you want to overcome, or let's call them barriers to your search results return that you will be better able to overcome. So that part we will get to, but with what we have discussed so far, you will get a sense of what is the importance of density analyzation at the time of indexing, because here the search engine is going to give a value or a ranking based on these analysis that it is doing. Okay. Then there could be 200 different signals or 200 different ways in which that content page is analyzed before it gets indexed, and all in milliseconds. That's because it is automated process. But at the same time, when you have got so many signals, what the part that we want an understanding for as a researcher is to know that how the search engine generally would respond or keep the index pages in its indexing system. So this is just a generalization of it. There could be word density analyzed to links, or there is like I said, 200 different signals. So if we have to be very particular about what is linked words and non-linked words, it's not going to help us, or it's not going to serve the purpose for us in understanding the the usefulness of it. So we are just going to leave it out. Even in the book, there is no explanation, and we don't want to get deeper into linked words and non-linked words for now, because it's not going to serve our purpose. So let's suppose that we have just dealt with density of words, and these are what is shown as analysis of those words. On the left hand side, we've got tags, you remember, that had a non-meta characteristic, which means that it defined the headings, the subheadings, and then captions and so on. H1 tags, or the named tags that has words like H1, H2, H3, and H4 are the headings. So this main heading or the top heading would have been captured in a tag called H1, and that says benefits of CIRS certification. So for the search, it is going to start to pick those pieces and start to put and separate H1 tags, which would have deeper importance or would play a role in algorithmic process of indexing with prioritizing certain words that stays within H1 tags, as compared to H2 tags, which is a sub tag or something which you can consider as a subheading to the main heading H1. So if H2 tags have wordings like certifications process, certifications tag, and all these, they're all captured, let's say in H2, then H1 with relation to H2 would have a significance for the algorithms to know where the top H1 or the H1 tags has more significance than H2, and then H3 in a similar way would have a lesser of an importance than H2. So H1, H2, H3, and other tags that we got to know of earlier when we were doing the body of text and we were looking at non-meta text. Those all have significance, but the relationship it has to the ranking algorithms or for the search engine to determine the importance or give weightage to a certain type of web page compared to others will depend on how they're going to play with these tags. And we are not discussing the algorithms, but we are discussing some of the important tags, and that's about as much as we need to understand. And main concept here, or the idea of this topic, is for you to know what the indexing process is like before the information is captured, for it to remain indexed for it to be available. So even before it is put inside of the indexing system, it is now getting separated into different types of information sets from the same content page. Another thing that the search is going to index is the URLs, because URLs or the links are most important for the search, in the sense that it is where the search engine is given direction on where to go and get certain pages. Those content pages are mapped through these URLs or links, and each of these links are actually put or defined according to standards or according to certain conventions which everyone follows. So it becomes a more of a predictable or something mm, of a data set. Let's call it a data set for now. It has data set. I'm calling those elements data sets that reside within the link. That includes domain, that includes folders, subfolders, and so on. So all those are placed according to certain conventions. And because those conventions are known to the search engine, and search engines, by the way, are very particular in defining for the programmers who put the sites together and how to put those URLs together. Meaning that whatever is in the stem of the URL or in the body of the URL have to be placed within certain parameters, like it couldn't be longer than certain characters. It should have folders, subfolders defined after every single backslash, and so on. So all those conventions are considered for the um, search to extract, organize at the time of indexing. So in case if you want your search term to be matched to any of the URLs or any of the wordings that are placed in the stem of the URLs, those can be matched also. So supposing we have a list here of URLs like AOFIRS Now all these URLs, where are these coming from? Again, we are just talking about that particular page, which we are following all the way through, starting from when we started from meta tags and we did the earlier slide. All of that is coming from a single page. What you're looking at right now is another snapshot of how the URLs from that page are extracted and collected. And the way that it's been organized is very interesting. Now let's look at as an example, and if you can see it, it is too small. I don't know if I can, if I need to magnify it, but if you can read it, it should be best. I would rather just leave it open like this and go through each one of these as a sample. So let's suppose I have AIRSassociation.org as one of the links that's picked up from that content page. Now this link is connected to a title tag. See these pages, or when you click on this, it will take you to a page that has got a title tag information that contains Association of Internet Research Specialists as the main title tag in the meta tag. Okay. So it is going to show what is in the meta tag or in the title portion. This information, the search engine is going to start to separate by extracting the title, the text within the title tags and put it against the individual URLs. Similarly, in AIRSassociation.org/about-AIRS, it picked up the title tag on that page, which is where we clicked on, and we go and open up the source code. In the title tag, you will find that it has these wordings about Association of Internet Research Specialists. Okay, so all these title tags against the URLs are measured and identified as a valuable piece of information which has a meaning for the search. And we'll have to use our logic to understand how it could be important for the search. Because these landing pages or the URLs have a significance only when it takes someone to the right page or to the page which can have the wordings that can match with your search terms. Therefore, it is important that these links also have significance with relationship to what the page is about. So that is where it is going to start to make sense for the search engine. It's just a process. Indexing is a process where the search engine is trying to organize something in a way that it is readily available for someone who's searching for the relevant information or the content pages, and it can deliver that relevant page to the user for a better user experience in getting what they require. So obviously it is like a closet. If you have a lot of space with different types of drawers and everything, but if you don't label your drawers, if you have a lot of things in your closet or a drawer that are not organized, it's going to be hard for someone to pick what they require. So this is the reason why the indexing system is more sophisticated and extremely complex, so that and it is getting, it is evolving, and slowly what they're trying to do is to really to make it more and more automated. Like artificial intelligence is where it is collecting that information and sort of putting it in the mathematical way, in the shape of algorithms, of course, and improving it as much as they can. Eventually, the end goal of a search engine is to deliver the perfect search results for the users by understanding the intent behind search query. The only drawback is the linguistically, it is very difficult to make a machine understand exactly the sense in which you're using certain words. So that complication remains, but through the experiences of how people are using the internet, how satisfied they are with getting certain results, or certain pages are more popular than others, or some pages have a higher authority because they are well known, they have, they have they are coming from a very authentic sources, meaning that they have higher authority, or the pages that have fresher contents, or the content is new or is not outdated. All those are going to play a part in designing the artificial intelligence, and collectively the search engine is going to keep improving those algorithms. But this is just a snapshot or a scenario to give you an idea of how the indexing happens. So it is not something that is one time, or something that is done, it is not done progressively, it is done instantly. But at the same time, there are hundreds of processes or hundreds of ways in which it is going to start to organize that information so that it is readily available for the user. Another thing that it's going to look at is the internal links and external links. Now, linking or URLs has got a lot of significance when you're doing searches, only because you have to understand the significance or the weightage or the importance the search engine gives it at the time of indexing it. So because the search engine pays a lot of attention to the links, and so should the researcher as well who's doing online searches. So the significance of URLs in terms of how you're going to find exact pages, or the understanding of how the URLs behave is very important, because the wordings that are embedded in those links have got a significance in the sense of how you would be able to find the pages directly when they are not found in from just doing plain search by putting the keywords. You may want to use some high-end or advanced operators like in URLs or all in URL. Those are the ones that are going to query these URLs only, and they're not going to look at anything else, but rather look at the URLs that are embedded in those content pages. Okay. So summary of internal links. Then there are types of links. There are internal links, there are external links, there are no follow links. Okay. There are, okay, so not from the programmer's point of view, but from a user's perspective, you would just want to focus on 3 types of links. Internal links are the ones that are going to allow you to navigate within the website or within a domain itself. Okay. External links are the ones that the external links are 2 types. One is outbound, the other one is inbound. The outbound links are the ones that are on those websites that take someone by clicking on it outside of that domain and takes it to another web page or to another domain's web page. Inbound links are the links that somebody else or the third party has that is pointing to your own domain. So if somebody else has clicked on it from another website and has bought that traffic onto your website, that is the it is an external link, but it is an inbound link. That means it is bringing the traffic onto your website. And the importance of internal links and external outbound and inbound will depend on how you intend to do the search, for example, or what is the objective of your search. Now, for example, if I need to find out who is using my links or any links that is pointing to my website that is bringing the traffic to me or to my pages, but it is coming from my competitor, or somebody clicked from outside and from another website and brought that customer to you, then you would want to know where the importance. I have a question. What does it mean when someone says they need to re-index? Okay, Pat is asking, sorry, do we have these slides right? Okay, I'm just reading the chat. I just read it when in between it pops up. Re-indexing means that you have to reorganize. Indexing process is not in your hand. Indexing process, in the sense in which we use the word, is for you to understand how the search engine is going to index your pages. If your pages are indexed or is collected by the search engine in let's say few months ago, just giving you an example. Reindexing is a broad term. You've asked me a question that goes deeper into understanding what the indexing process is like when we are talking about marketing, SEO, and giving a higher ranking for the purposes of getting indexed in Google search, for instance. So let's suppose you have indexed your search, your web page 2 months ago was indexed by Google and it had a higher ranking, and you found 2 months after that today your page is being taken over on a higher ranking or against some other competitor that is showing much above you, and you've lost your position and you're getting lower in ranking. That means that you will have to look at your own web page to understand and see how you are, why it is not being indexed properly or why it is losing that ranking. So what you do is that you look at your HTML code and see if you're following all the suggestions from Google in setting up the coding or putting the keywords that are probably not as relevant or not as frequented by the users, or you are not following certain conventions that Google has asked for the programmers to improve the ranking of their search pages. So you are going to ask the search engine to re-index it by changing the page or changing the URLs. Similarly, re-indexing also means that you are asking the search engine to index something that it is not showing for a long time, meaning that it is not showing up probably in the or not showing at all. It could be any reason. So you would want this to ask Google to re-index it. Google allows you to have your page re-indexed by forcing the Google or asking the Google to look at it favorably or to index it because its robots or its programs or crawlers missed it out for some reason. So that's where you're going to ask for the page to be re-indexed by search engines like Google. Is that understood, Pat? Okay.
Yes, that was great. Thank you.
Okay. I don't know why I'm losing my voice today. Anyway, as long as you can hear me and understand what I'm talking about, it should be good enough. External links, same way it is showing. You see, if you have the slides, you should go through them. Besides, you have a book that you can always go back to when we get done with these sessions. If you have like half an hour or 20 minutes, just go through the chapters. It's easy to discover these topics because first of all, these slides or the topics we are covering are placed sequentially in the book form also, which is really the book itself. And you can always do Control F and put the, whatever you're looking for, and it's just going to show up. Anyway, this is a slide to just give you an overview. Okay, good. Now that we have, now let's look at external links. External links is where, in this case, we are talking about outbound links, right? It's not inbound links, it's outbound external links, but it seems that these are outbound links, means that it has a domain where you can click on and it's going to take you out of your own web page and take you onto another's web page. For instance, facebook.com/AOFIRS Association. So this link that it has collected from that content page is clickable and it is going to take you out of your own domain and take you onto a page that talks about AIRS Association on facebook.com platform. So they also have a certain pieces of information which corresponds to or which makes a relationship between the external link and what the external link is about. Okay, like this one, for instance, twitter.com/internet research. This page redirects to. Now, this is not complete information because we don't have enough space, but when we are doing simulation or when the search engine is doing it, it has pieces of information that gives it certain sense or gives it an information enough information for it to make sense out of what this link is about. So if you have a lot of external links, let's say on a web page, and less of internal links, then the ratio or the difference between the ratio is going to have an impact on ranking. Some website or web pages have a lot of outbound links or external links, and that does not give it kind of is it gives a negative indication to the search engine that you're using or basically playing with links on that page that don't exactly bring your own content or is not expressing what the the content that is appearing from your own domain, but rather it's pointing to others' domain. So that content may not be as interesting, or it may be a marketing page, or maybe it does not have a value for the search engine to give it a higher ranking. So again, this is in the indexing process. This is at the process where the indexing is preparing or prepping that page to be discovered by the end users. Okay, so even this piece of information is separated and is inserted in the index in a certain way. Okay. And then we have this one, which is talking about words in the URL, like what is the frequency. See, it can, we have a manual, which is our internal document, and that has at least 50 different attributes or 50 different signals, okay, that we are working on and figuring out, because Like I said, and I think I told you before, there is no book out there that's going to explain or tell anyone exactly what Google does. Okay, so one of the things we do at AOFIRS is that we compile notes, try to understand the pulse of how the algorithms are shaping up, how Google is evolving. So we get a better understanding to how the search response or the behavior of search based on the outcome of what we collect as experiments and certain tests under, you know, certain conditions that we create for doing those experimentations. So for that reason, I would say that what you are looking at in the slides is just a fraction of what else the indexing process involves. But like I said, it is to give you an idea or give you a sense of what happens at the time of indexing. Some of the information that I've shared with you today would have a relevance in getting a sense of how certain operators work in finding those pages by, first of all, knowing that certain type of information exists in the indexes or in those repositories of search engine, so that you can tap into it and bring that information or to do a deeper level of search. Okay, so that's going to be the benefit that you will connect with later on. Here is another slide. Words and URLs count. Okay, non-text. It's not going to make any sense to you, but what would make sense is for your understanding is the word density, the URLs, the content that it is capable of running semantics over, and the meta tag information on the headers or at the top layer, top level. This is what is important for you. And that's where we are going to end this. Now, one last thing. Remember that on the websites, and I guess most of the important, or you could say even e-commerce websites, have something called sitemaps. Sitemaps is really a map of all those web pages that connect to the same domain. Or in other words, sitemap tells you how many pages are there in a single domain by mapping individual navigations as if it is a root or a parent-child relationship, or where the main navigation takes you to a sub navigation and sub takes you to another navigation under it. And so it continues as if it is creating a chart or a table. This is one example of a sitemap. Now, sitemap, I'm just giving you an idea, or it could be one of the better examples for understanding how the crawlers or robots or spiders of a search engine are navigating through the internet to grab those pages or find pages, or how would the search engine know if certain domain has just come up, or it's a new domain that got registered, certain pages that's been indexed before, because it doesn't want it to be a repetitive action of same information to be fetched and put back in. It would like to know the freshness of that information, of whether or not certain new pages have appeared inside of certain domain, or if the content within those pages has been changed. That information or that kind of intelligence really is tied up to the sitemap, which is where it is going to look into and crawl through a single domain to figure out new information, new content, new pages, or discover new domains. So here you could see in the sitemap, it shows about. First of all, it's a home page, and in home page you have about navigation. When you click on about, you have another navigation like board members, management teams, and so on. And then, so it continues. So here is another navigation, which is a main navigation on top, and this is a sub navigation, and other are sub navigations to the sub navigation, like articles, blogs, that reside within the knowledge network page, or this is where you would find all these links that is shown. So the crawler or the robots are going to go into the sitemap and look up all these pages. It's very important for any website to have a very solid and a very compatible. When I use the word compatible here, I simply mean what is directed by the search engine as more acceptable or considered as basis on which it is going to accept that information, or for the robots and meta crawlers to qualify that page for gathering that information. You need to follow, or you would have to have that compatibility, okay, with or have the affinity to work with the search engine robots. So these crawlers would obviously would expect all the websites to follow sitemap, to be programmed in a certain language. It uses XML mostly, or UML, basically to grab that information, which is another layer or a more sophisticated form of HTML. Okay, so I don't have to worry about it. Just ignore what I said. I don't want to confuse anyone, but sitemap is something that one has to have an idea to know when we talk about search engine robots collecting of web pages. You would know that it is first of all collecting it through the sitemap, or this is where it's going to crawl in first to get under the hood and figure out what the site is about and where the information is changing. So this is all we are going to learn on the simulation. Next, we are going to talk about keywords, search phrases. We're going to talk about intent translation, context, implicit, explicit context, to know where the search engine is going to interpret your intent behind the search, or your search phrases or search terms have to be placed together or put together in a certain way. Certain words are more important than others. So just to give you that overview, we are going to continue with this after the break. I'm going to take a 10 minutes break. Let's start with the next segment. Hopefully we'll be able to finish it today. If not, then, because I intend to start with the search operators, where you actually would look at how the search queries are made first by using Booleans, operators, or basic search operators. We're going to talk about proximity and advanced search. And this is where I think you have taken the course that serves you the best in terms of, doing actual hands-on practical search. So that we are going to start on Thursday or Friday, and it's going to continue for, at least 6 or 8 classes after. So in the meantime, what we are covering right now is basics or fundamentals, you can say, something that is going to solidify your basic concepts. We'll be dealing with intent translation by search algorithms, textual semantics. Just because the indexing or the database that the search engine has is playing with the words, understanding, recognizing words, meaning behind them, trying to make sense out of combination of words. So the database is nothing but text for the search engine to understand and to interpret. And therefore, we will look at the science of semantics, which is the textual intelligence purely. There are 3 different types of semantics that we would recognize right now at the top level. And then there are, different layers. It is a kind of a science, and something that I work with quite a bit when I'm doing algorithms. And artificial intelligence that's built into it, as I mentioned before as well, improving every time because the Google search is learning through a process called machine learning. So the user's behavior, the human response, everything is now programmed based on what the search engine is collected as its, or you can call it the collective wisdom of the search engine through experience of learning how the people are using the search box, okay, to find information. One of the ways in which we separate the semantics is through separating or distinguishing them into three portions. One is formal semantics. It gives logic, meaning, gives a sense, a reference based on machine learning, basically. That is formal semantics. Lexical semantics is literally based on the pure meaning of the word, not giving it a sense or not interpreting the intent. Basically, that's lexical semantics. It's just based on words. And then there is conceptual semantics, like the sense in which you have used it. Because the search is not looking at the expressions, the pitch. It's not based on the voice. It is based on how you write the search now. So it is sort of trying to give it a better sense or understand in what ways you have asked a question. For instance, one person would ask the same question, that someone else is asking, but in a different way. And even though the answer might be the same, just depends on how they have phrased the question. So that conceptual semantics is something that is also tied up to formal semantics, or it has a relationship with formal semantics and tries to understand through machine learning. So we've got formal, we've got lexical semantics and conceptual semantics. This is something that I assume would be a question in the exam, because I've seen it. Mostly it is coming as fill in the blanks, like it's going to tell you, or the question might say, a type of semantics which studies the logical aspects is called what? It's formal semantics. So that's how it's going to come. Lexical semantics, giving literal meaning to the word is lexical semantics. So that's all we have to know from this slide. Okay, this first part in this slide, we are going to deal with later on. So it's not like we are ignoring it, but I'm going to start with giving you a concept of stemming and lemmatization. That is the basic concept which the search engine would look at and apply when you are writing certain words. Like it's going to start a process called stemming and complement it with a process called lemmatization. And there is another one in next slide that's called ontology. Stemming is where the way in which you're going to write the words is not going to have an impact, but rather it's going to look at the root meaning of the word to understand if someone has written it in three different ways. For example, if it is a word cheaper that you have used, and the search thinks that you could have used a better way, or a better, give it a, or it would think that it is unable to understand, and therefore it is going to default onto the root word or the base word. So for cheaper, the base word would be cheap. Other words that would stem out would be cheapen, cheaper, and so on. So it is something that if search engine is unable to understand, it is going to default onto the root word to know or to learn what it means. Okay, so that is called stemming. Lemmatization is something that would replace a word or find a better substitute for it, or would want to sense the intent behind that word by finding an alternative word that is used in the same sense by other users but is more prominent more popular, and yet it substitute that word you have used without losing the meaning given to that search term. So that is what we call the lemmatization. Okay. Because of social media today and the way in which the information is spreading and how the big data is floating around, or raw data that could have a root or an origin connected to a single entity or even an individual, would be collected by the search engine to discover a relationship between entities, individuals, like human and both human and non-human relationships. So it is doing that collection and making sense of that raw data or that spread out data by connecting it with where it is probably originated from, or it may have a relationship that it is collected by discovering it within social media, like finding information on the type of websites that you visit mostly, your preferences in doing e-commerce activities, in relationships where you have colleagues in your network, where you have friends and family that's connected. So it is bringing that data into play, except that it is going to be a little bit reluctant, or it may not be as complete, depending on whether or not that other pieces of information that is tied up to you is whether or not it is a private information or it is a public information. So it is obviously going to look at the publicly available information or the data sets that builds a relationship together. So that is the ontology part, which is where we would also learn how the web browser collects certain type of information to create that ontology for different reasons, for marketing purposes, for references, for trends, for preferences. However way they may want to use that information will be collected through the browsers as a part of it. Other information can be collected from the pictures that you have uploaded, the type of social media that you visit mostly, so on and so forth. So that is a huge way in which the ontology has now given the search a kind of an insight into your own world. Same way in the business world, it is going to look at the business relationships in many different ways. But right now, we're just trying to figure out what ontology is. It is going to look at the linguistics, the informatics, and the other technology to generate new and more accurate query terms for the users. In other words, what ontology does on top of doing the connectivities of data relationships, it is also giving an insight to the search engine to understand how the relationships would impact trends. Like it could be seasonal trends, it could be a piece of information that is in fashion, or something that is being discussed in social media frequently, and so on. Okay. So in summing up, in contextual or textual semantics, the algorithm is going to look at ontology, search expansion, stemming, and lemmatization. It is also going to look at certain type of information which particularly is collected by the search because it is frequented or frequently used, or it is considered to be important database that it can refer to or default to anytime it has any ambiguities in understanding something. So for example, if it is name diminutives, Liz for Elizabeth. If you wrote Liz Carter, it knows that the first name or a Christian name is Elizabeth. So even if it doesn't find Liz, it's going to look for Elizabeth. Synonyms, idioms, quotes. More importantly, it has tables in its search, like for zip codes, for example. If you used 5 digits, and those are, the kind of numbers that can be identified with any postal code or zip codes, it would know that it is a zip code without you describing it. So if you wrote zip 32835 for Orlando, you don't have to write zip anymore. It would know that it is a zip code. It wouldn't consider it a number as such. Similarly, things like abbreviation of certain countries, like for Netherlands, it's going to use, or Netherlands, I think it's going to use DE. All those abbreviations that you're going to use, which could be hundreds of different types, but because they are more commonly used in the sense of identifying with certain type of information which is supposed to be standard, like even the phone numbers, if it is the area code and you wrote 647, it knows that it is a telephone number. If you wrote it in a certain way or in a certain format, it knows it is a date. It knows it is, so all those tables are created by the search engine already. And that is part of the algorithmic process also. So this is where we are going to identify at least 3 of these under algorithmic process. Then the language algorithmic process, machine learning and artificial intelligence. We were talking about relationships, social media, for example, friends and family, business, work, and colleagues. Now here is the ontology part, and on the top is purely the textual semantics. Okay. This is an example that is showing a relationship of Bart Simpson. And it is something that has been, this chart that you're looking at, this illustration is coming from actual search. So if you wrote something, where does Homer Simpson's work, you would get this chart actually. And you would find that in the search results, there is a lot of ontology described. So if you want to know how this information or what type of information makes ontology, you can actually run this example on your own browser and you'll discover it. Yeah. Here is a search that's showing whatever we've learned with the lemmatization and stemming. This is a perfect example. Now supposing in this search box we wrote, never mind in title and a colon, just ignore it for now. Okay, just suppose that we have John Turner carpenter wood shop brochure. These are the words we have used in search. Okay. When we run this query, we get all these results that you're looking at. Now here the ontology and lemmatization is showing up. For example, the word brochure is being substituted by the word catalog. The word wood shop is substituted by woodworking. See, it is doing it on its own without you writing it or without you inserting these words in your search box. You see that these variations are showing up, not exactly the words that you have used in your search. But all of these words that are coming up, you may want to get an idea of what type of wordings are bringing these results. So with the results that show up in your SERPs, you can read through these snippets to get a sense of what is more relevant or what words can be substituted. So that could be another approach when you are not sure if the keywords you've used are correct or they they need an improvement, you can look at what's showing up in your search results and try to substitute these words. So let's suppose we have, again, coming back to the word brochure, see here, it is substituted by the word flyer. Now, the word wood, what is really interesting is being used here for the name of someone whose first name is James and the last name is Wood. So when you're writing something that also is a word that connects with the name of an individual or a person or a Christian name, you would find that it is going to start to confuse the search, where the word wood, instead of using it in the sense of woodworking shop, it is now using or bringing results that has to do with James Wood. Okay, store is substituted by shop. So this is what is not controlled by you, but rather it's an automated action. And if you find that your results are not delivering exactly the same words, it's only because stemming lemmatization is taking place, and you would be in a position to control it better if you want to be more precise and you want to make sure that, you know, all these words or the search phrase appears verbatim as is, or explicitly whatever you have put in the search needs to be showing in the search is exactly the way it is. Then we will do an exercise to make the search bring exactly those results with the same term and the same words. And you would also be able to overcome this stemming and lemmatization process by putting more restraints through the search operators. Here is another example. Beth Mary Jones, just the name Beth Mary Jones. There were two names, Mary Elizabeth Reed, Mary Elizabeth Jones, that translated diminutive short form Beth into original. So Elizabeth is what we are looking for. Or let's suppose we don't use the word the name Elizabeth and we just use Beth. Look, it made a substitution on its own and it found both of these, except that the word Beth is now substituted or is changed. Here is another scenario where the way in which you're going to express the same idea with phrasing the two search terms together and figuring out why the results are different, you would find that the semantically similar sentences would bring different results. The bird is bathing in the sink. Birdie is washing in the water basin. Certain ideas, and by the way, while we are doing this, just occurred, like, you know, if you are doing your search from North America, remember how when you are given a choice between selecting the language, you see something that says EN UK, and then another one that says EN US. So you make that choice, even though it's English, but it is two different styles, or I guess two different ways in which people speak. Linguistically, it may have a distinction, somewhat subtle, however subtle it may be, but it's not the same exactly. Same way, culture and certain expressions or the wordings in which they are used, the words that are used in certain sense may be different from someone using the same wordings but using it from another part of the world. Like in UK, I believe they don't use the word line. Like in North America and Canada, we say stay in the line or get in the line, but in UK they use queue. I don't know what they use in Australia, but there could be these differences. So depending on where you're searching from, the region that you are browsing with your IPs identifying with where you are located, it's going to have an impact in phrasing or writing certain wordings, but the search engine may interpret it differently because it is regionally algorithmically adjusted or fine-tuned. So it is fine-tuned for English in India. I know that for sure. It is also made more compatible for Australia versus in North America. You will discover it unless you want to test it out yourself. If you have the VPN or L is there in Australia, he can actually demonstrate it for you. So depending on how you have used the same language or how you have phrased certain wordings would have a direct impact in what search results are delivered. The bird is bathing, and so for this example, these two will bring two different search results, even though they may be used in the same sense of what the intent might be behind writing these two, but writing them in two different ways. Here is another example. Some critical detail is missing, like in news, for instance. If you want to learn for the same news story, let's say, that is politically sensitive, and not everything is about North America, so there could be news agencies that are putting the captions or headings or news stories, giving it a title that is different, or that is placed differently, or that is something that is not exactly how those titles would be used in USA. You will probably end up getting a different version of the story. Okay, or that story might be picked up from Eastern Europe versus in North America. So if somebody is browsing in Russia talking about Ukrainian issues and they're phrasing it in a certain way, it's going to bring the news from Russia and not from North America. So depending on where you are using your search, or even the browser matters as well. So anyway, these are these different ways in which you're going to write or phrase your sentences. This one is interesting, where John said he is a witness but not a suspect. Now, if somebody else has to write the same thing and plays or puts it like John says he is not a suspect anymore, there is no difference between what is expressed in the first sentence versus the second one right here. But it is how you wrote it is going to bring two different set of results. Questions and answers. If you have a question to ask the search engine, they are working on what used to, first of all, what used to be before with the search engine like Google was that it would not entertain questions. Like it wouldn't understand if it is a question or if it is an expression or a statement of some sort. But now the Google has learned through collection of how people wrote certain types of statements in a question format to get enough information to know what type of pages to bring back in search result as answers to those questions. First of all, it started to recognize questions. And second is that it started to bring the correct results. Why it's doing that and how close it is getting to it is shown here. For example, there is semantically different and semantically similar answers. So it is going to look at what answers were satisfactory or what answers were clicked on mostly when certain search words or phrases were put in the search box, even though they would have meant they're expressed differently, but they would have the same answers, or the answers to those pages were considered as more acceptable to whoever has put those questions. So if the question was, how old are you versus what is your age, it would mean the same thing, and search engine would know that it is a question and know that the answer or the pages or the results it's going to bring would be the same for both type of questions. Because here it is saying I'm 20 years old, and in the second one it is saying I'm 20 years old. It is the same answer is there. So it has semantically same answers, and that is why these questions are now considered to be the same. Okay. That is to overcome the barrier of understanding the different ways in people ask the same questions. So not to disappoint them, they have started to connect the answers to those questions that appears different but have the same answers. We have done lexical barrier, syntax level barrier, and referential barrier. This is natural language recognition. Okay. We've done this one. MLI is another intelligence, which is machine learning. Everything that is collected by the browser, as I mentioned to you, is part of the machine learning. Part of the search results that are delivered by the search engine based on certain type of questions are part of the machine learning. This is part of the machine learning. The more important topic where we had to actually get to eventually was about intent translation and explicitity and implicity, or explicit and implicit meaning to the context, or the intent could be better explained by understanding the explicit value and implicit value to the search for bringing the results to the users. Let's start with the query here. See, in this, we have a chart that gives you an idea of what context means, what is the difference between intent and context. And then it talks about the predictable results or something that the search engine suggests for you. And eventually we are going to look at the delivered results, which gives a ranking to the pages that appear on the first few SERPs or search engine result pages. Starting with the query, we've used simply two words, market research. But these two words may not be sufficient for the search to interpret or to translate your intent behind the search. Here the search would find market and research, these two words, even though they make sense together, but for the search to know whether it's a question that you are asking about market research, or finding a meaning of a market research, or in what sense you have used the word market research, it would not know that. So for us to give it, or to make it more understandable for the search, we need to identify the, or we need the search to find out the intent behind these two words that we have put in the search. It's going to look for definition, or looking for a job, or hiring someone. So that intent has to be defined. The only way that you're going to to give a helping hand to the search engine so that it can interpret your intent is to add context to your search word, which means to give it strength by adding or giving more meaning, by adding certain words which are going to bring or give it a sense in which you have used it. So for us to get the intent translated by the search, we're going to add context like jobs. In red fonts, we have used the word jobs here. And then we've used Los Angeles as a location, as a reference. So now we have actually made it more of a precision search, in the sense that we have given it the intent, we have added a context to the search by adding these two different wordings here. Next step is predict. The search, after you submit the query, it is going to give you a helping hand in bringing some of the suggested wordings or combination of these words where people have more frequently used them in the searches or more popular searches within with using these words are shown here in the drop box. And this happens while you're typing. There are different types of predictive or assistive tools that are actually built into your search, and you all know them. There's nothing of a surprise. I mean, we see things like autofill forms that brings the information from the collection of data that it's got in its browser already put in as a history of your profile. It has your recent searches that you have done. Others are like suggested searches. There is people searches related to and so on. So all those boxes that appear are all predictive based on how you have written those words, or while you're writing these, it is going to start to show up as references. Now, while it is doing its own automated process, it is also applying algorithms, which we call ranking algorithms, that is going to give precedence to one snippet or one search result over another. And the relevance of that page that is giving it a higher ranking will depend on 4 main factors. Let's call them main factors. However, there are many more signals to it, but the more important ones are the authority of the page, the freshness of the content, the originality, and the popularity. So the authority of the page, what makes the authority of a page will depend on the origin of the page, the citations or references that it contains, whether that is coming from a domain that is to do with .edu or educational institution, .mil, even .org has a higher value or a higher authority, professional organization, international organizations, or third parties or outside agencies that are pointing to this particular website or web page. To gain that authority would mean that the inbound links or the links that are pointing are coming from high authority sites. That also adds to a better authority or gives it a higher ranking. Freshness of information is another factor. Freshness means whether the content is being changed, it's been upgraded, or it's been changed more frequent, or it's frequently producing original material. Every time the robots or the boats are going to bring or to capture those pages, it is going to look at whether or not the content has changed or it is stale, it is remain the same. If it is more stagnant, it's going to give it a less ranking. The more originality of the content is there. Here the word originality is used in the sense of whether or not that information is coming from another news source, or it is a recycled, or it is a plagiarized product, or it is a content that is created by the original author who has uploaded it physically. So it is going to do its own due diligence to understand whether that page is original or whether or not it is carrying the information that belongs to somebody else, but it is being shared on that page. Popularity means how much of a traffic is coming to that page, or whether or not that domain is popular enough, whether or not the Google search consider it a valuable domain or important enough domain based on how many people are actually clicking on it. Okay. So this is just a general overview, I would say, rather, to understand what intent and context is and how the ranking plays a part in bringing them according to the ranking system or algorithms that is going to prefer one type of page over another in the sequence of how it is set in the CIRS. How okay, so this slide we will come to later. It is just repetition of the same thing, but unless you understand what query language means, the database indexing system, lexicon, I'm not going to use this slide for now, and we'll keep it pending, and we'll continue with understanding some other aspects of context. Now, context is also something that a search engine is going to highlight or consider when it is making a decision on what pages are more popular or what pages belong to the type of question or the search phrase, based on identifying or dissecting individual phrases and connecting the relationship between words inside of those phrase searches. Here we are talking about phrase searches particularly, not just a single keyword. So let's suppose here two people are writing a search query that says, one of which says Empire State Building height. The other one writes, how high is the Empire State Building, in a question format. So the search engine is going to bring the results that would be exactly same or similar to whoever else is asking it, but browsing in the other browser or from somewhere else and phrasing it differently. This is how it is going to connect these two statements to understand which results to bring back. It is going to highlight, first of all, that is in the with the yellow highlighter. It is going to pick the word height, and on the other one, it is also going to pick another word, high. Here we are talking about stemming, and it is going to build a relationship between words, because if you noticed between these two statements, these are placed within the quotation marks. So these are confined textual statements that are considered in the sequence in which they are set, or however way they are placed inside of the quotation marks are considered to be verbatim or to be matched exactly. So between these two, and considering that these are within quotes, or we are going to look at how it is going to create relationship between words. Okay, so Empire State Building in relationship to heights, here Empire State Building in relationship to the word high. These relationships are created quickly, and it is somewhat semantically identified as a relationship that would bring the same results back. So if someone wrote the word high and instead of Empire State, it wrote Empire Building, could be another building, it won't work. So the two words, which is the one that is high and height, that is what you are looking for, and in what relationship you are looking for the word high is important, which makes it a primary keyword. That means it has to be written the same way. Empire State Building has to be the same as Empire State Building. And then how is the, that is in green color, is the differentiator between the two. It is going to ignore the word how, is, and the. It is only going to work with the word Empire State Building height and Empire State Building high. The reason we are discussing this today is for you to know that you don't have to write long sentences to make the search engine understand intent behind your search. Sometimes it is okay to write longer queries if your context is essential. But if you're going to write them as long sentences, it may create more confusion at times, because sometimes it is a repetitive word. Sometimes adding more words would change the meaning or would make it more complicated for the search to bring a precision result. So short, concise, but using two types of information, what you want to get out of it, and in what relationship or in what context you want to get that information. So this information that is highlighted in blue and the one that is highlighted in yellow are most important. This part we don't have to worry about. Next is to gain an understanding of how the context that you apply to your search query would direct the search results in bringing precisely the information that you have asked for versus what is imposed by the search or what is implied by the search engine through automated process to consider or bring to you with reference to your explicit statement, as if it is understood it or it has a way of attaching or thrusting a certain type of information onto your explicit side of your query. In fact, it is a kind of a barrier that becomes a restrictor, but your understanding of what type of implicit context is attached to your stated search query is important. This way we will also get to know how we can overcome this by improving the or directing the query using certain restrictors and search operators. So what is considered explicit and what is implicit? Okay. This concept is extremely important, and anytime that we are going to create our search queries, we'll have to keep this in mind. We will have to foresee, even while we are writing the query, to understand that if we write it in a certain way, it is going to create these barriers or it's going to impose certain results. And based on that understanding or the depth of knowledge, you would be able to add context or reposition it or rephrase it or to use certain other operators. In the explicit context or the explicitity of search phrase is understood by the search engine in a way that you have written the phrase or you have phrased your search, including keywords or sentences that you write. So that is explicit instructions, that is explained, that is put in black and white. But the explicit signals are of two kinds. One is the primary context and the other one is the secondary context, which means primary context part has the kind of words or search phrases together that if you change them or alter them, it would give a different meaning to the search. Whereas the secondary context is a helping hand or is the kind of words that will assist or reinforce your primary context. So there is a distinction between primary context and secondary context. You will have to ensure that your primary context is well supported by secondary context only if there is a need for it. If you have used those, if you're not able to distinguish primary from secondary, you may be changing primary context and this would keep getting you the incorrect results. So when you write a search phrase, just make sure that your primary context or your primary search words are separated from secondary so that you don't change the primary words even by accident. Okay, and we will learn how certain search phrases are separated between primary, secondary context later. But for now, let's assume that we are talking about explicit signals and conceptually primary and secondary has to be defined. Here we have made our search query even more granular, or it is separated into certain words which we would like to call primary, secondary, or we will break them into the type of words that cannot be changed and others that can be changed. Okay, so in this chart, we are using 3 words as an example. We are using internet, research, and certification. These are the minimum number of words we have to use to explain this. Now, we have in these 3 words, if we put them in a search box and assuming that these vertical bars have no significance for now, okay? Just assume these 3 words are inside of a search box. The word that we have used here, the word internet, we are assuming is a kind of word that we will distinguish as a head word, which means that it is the word that cannot be changed, it cannot be substituted, or it cannot be added to. Like this is considered a kind of word that will always stay in your search term. Second word we have identified as a modifier. Modifier is distinguished from head word by assuming that you can always replace this word, but you cannot do away with it, which means that unless you have something like a synonym or something that replaces this or has a root word to it, you will not be able um, to get rid of it, or you would want to give instruction to whoever is doing search for you. Like in AOFIRS over here, when we have to delegate search to someone to find certain type of information, we want to make sure that we give those instructions by identifying the keywords first, then phrasing those words together, and within those phrases we want to break them into head words, the modifier, and the tail words. And you will see why we do that. First of all, this exercise is important when you're delegating something to someone else who is doing the research for you, because time is money. And a lot of times when you're doing online research or someone else is doing it for you, they would probably get confused with what words they can change, or by changing certain words or dropping certain words, they would actually be wasting a lot of time or finding irrelevant information. So these are to be understood as set of instructions which needs to be distinguished between these 3 different types of um, wordings or words that can be changed, cannot be changed, or the ones that has to remain constant. Head word is internet, modifier is research, and then the third set of word, which is the word certification, I would call it a tail word. Tail word is the kind of words that you can add as a context. You can add more tail to it. You can drop these. You can, add as many tail words as you can, or you can change this word altogether. Like certification can be changed to training, but the word modifier, the word head normally remains the same, whereas the word modifier, you have little bit of a flexibility. And this is to control the search online searches. Okay, okay, now let's go and let's look at the second layer of it. Okay, here you see that I have added, never mind what primary context and secondary context, don't get distracted by this. We have just done 1 and now we're going to do 2, which means we are talking about this area and these 3 head, modifier, and tail. So let's suppose that you want to change your search, you want to rethink your search phrase, and you feel that the word internet and research should become the head word. You can add more words to it to make it or group it into a head phrase. Okay, so now it has become, internet and research has become head, whereas the word research has now shifted on the right hand side and it has become a modifier, and the word certification is now being a tail word, has now taken up the the meaning as in the modifier, and you can modify the word certification, but the word course that's been added could be a tail word, or you can add more tail words to it. And this is when you give the flexibility to your researchers to, telling them these are the tail words and you can change these, but don't change these two because they are considered head words. Head words are the primary context. Over here you could see these two words, means that they cannot be changed, or it gives the main, or without these two words the query would fail. So no compromises here. Secondary context is anything other than the primary context. So everything like modifier, tails, or any other words that you're going to add to the tails would become secondary context. Secondary context is a broader distinction, while head, modifier, and tail is more at a granular level. So these are when we are giving, writing the search phrases and putting the keywords in the search box. We are giving explicit signal, defined signals, definitive instruction to the search. This is controlled by us. Within these two, there are distinctions we make. Now, this is another concept, but it is tied up to the whole thing, including primary, secondary, something that we call broad search or a narrow search. Broad search and a narrow search are the two approaches depending on the complexity of the issue, the nature of the problem. Like certain searches are more of the exploratory nature, where you're discovering something, finding new information, and then there is uh, and you need a broader search results, or you may not have a definite agenda in mind, or you may not have precise search words, search phrases. You have that concept in your mind, but you don't quite know what words would fit in nicely to bring that that specific result. So you are going to do a broad search, which means that it is going to be something we call short tail. It's called a short tail query. Don't ask me why they call it short tail, but here's a cat with a short tail and here's a bird with a long tail. That's all I know about short, as far as why they have used it or why they use long tail or short tail. But the idea behind these two is one type of search is called broad search. The other one is a narrow search. Short tail means less words are used, less context is put into it. See, if you are going to do a precision search, you're going to give it a better context, add more words, make it more bulky so that the search knows precisely what to get. But by design or by intent, if you want to do a broad search, you're going to do what they call broad search query or short tail. Short tail simply means use less words, less context, more results. Okay. And if it is a long tail, it means more context, more supportive word, especially more tail words you add to it, so that it gives it a more solid context. It is more precise, and you do that when you know exactly what you're looking for. When it is a long tail or a narrow search, we also call it a precision search. In general sense of how we approach online research, we look at the project or a problem as a broad search or a precision search, or a long short tail or a long tail. At the same time, we also look at the approaches. The two type of approaches would be, for the broad search queries, we need to have we have to give a lot of weightage to the primary words or a primary context. In the uh, narrow search or precision search, we are going to give it a more precise set of keywords that would also means that we would be looking at the search results to observe what gets returned, to keep improving that query by substituting those words without changing the primary keywords. So the tail words and the modifiers would be affected in the narrow search. When we are doing precision search, there is the approach we call where we're using advanced search operators, and we are using a lot of contextual word. But at the same time, if there is an ambiguity somewhere in the search results, or your search query is you're not finding exactly the right set of search phrases, then what you do is you use something called proximity search. Proximity search is an approach which is where you are going to use certain type of operators that are going to bring you some information back when you don't know precisely what to ask for. That approach means that the way in which you're going to set those words together, or put those phrases together, you would use operators like wildcards, something that uses a symbol of asterisk, to use them as a placeholder to find that missing information. Another approach to finding proximity search is that you only know few pieces of information from a long text or a long paragraph, but you don't know what else could be found in between. So two concepts or two ideas can be found on the same page, but the number of words in between, you will have to be able to give it a parameter, or give a sense of how many words that you want to occur in between those two, that you can that you remember or you're sure of, so that it's going to fill in all those words. And the number of words that you are going to instruct the search to get for you that could be missing would mean that you will have to use a specially designed operator that's called the proximity operator. And we use it quite often, especially you know, in finding concepts that are very new, or finding data or information that otherwise you cannot connect together as a full information set, or if it is a long sentence that you don't want to search for, or it is you know, a kind of information that requires to be filled in by different types of information or different types of wording in between, so you can make a choice which one you want. You use a proximity operator by giving it an by identifying with the number of words you want to see in between. So those proximity search and precision search are tied up to the concept of long tail. Long tail is the kind of approach that we are going to use when we are using proximity and along with the precision search. Okay. Yes, we'll get the recording for the. Am I over the time limit? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I got carried away today, but then we started late as well. So anyway, I'll continue with this lecture. This is going to be more on the same lines. We'll still be doing textual semantics tomorrow. And then we will be doing browser predictive information that is collected by the browser. We'll be covering that. Intent translation finally will be summed up at the end of the class tomorrow. And after that, we will be starting with the booleans and basic search and all that. So let's call it an evening. Thank you for your time. Unless there is question, I would definitely be willing to answer it now. If not, then adios. I'll see you all tomorrow.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
I just need to just make sure I heard you correctly. You said the short tail search and the short tail and the broad search are the same?
Yes.
And then you said that the long tail and the narrow search are the same.
Yes.
It seems like it should be the opposite to me, because it's more words.
I'll give an answer to that. First is that broad search or a short tail means that you're using less words and less context.
Okay.
Which means that if you put like the example we just did on market research, see if we use these two words, we get a lot more results. if we had put the word jobs and Los Angeles, it would become more precise. It will
Okay.
have added, so it becomes long tail means just too many words. Short tail means less words. Less word means more results.
Gotcha. I understand it now.
Right. All right.
Okay,
Okay.
thank
Then.
you.
Okay. Thank you. Bye bye. See you tomorrow. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.